It's the most wonderful time of the year. No, not that. There we go, much better. And, as per tradition, I have another horror game video for you to enjoy this holiday season. With a third game in the series all but confirmed, I figured now would be a good time to look at the Layers of Fear series, which I'll be reviewing and comparing. Released in early 2016, Layers of Fear 1 was Bloober Team's debut into the world of horror. A large Victorian mansion serves as this game's setting. The mansion is home to the game's protagonist, a term which is kind of a stretch. He is a famed painter, though is never actually named in-game. References to the painters and his family's names, such as those found in notes or newspaper clippings, always have their names scratched out or obscured in some way. Things start out normal enough, maybe a bit spooky here and there, but eventually things ramp up and you find yourself in rooms and areas that can change or shift around unpredictably. There are such horror game staples as hallways that repeat in a never-ending circle, and doors that once you realize are locked and turn around to try to find another way, you're suddenly in a different room. And there are plenty of strange happenings all along the way, dotted with unsettling sounds and scenery. Many walls and halls are decorated with disturbing paintings, many from actual Renaissance-era artists. Of course, over time the paintings can become distorted or change completely, or even occasionally help with some puzzle solving. The actual gameplay is void of mechanics, basically to the point of a walking simulator. You can grab doorknobs and drawer handles and drag the joystick or mouse in the appropriate direction to open them. A lot of time is spent opening doors, cupboards, etc. You're incentivized to open as much as possible if you care about the story. The typical gameplay loop is to wander through the constantly shifting mansion, exploring and unlocking bits of story by finding notes, pictures, letters, objects of interest, and the like, fleshed out a bit by the occasional voiceover until you eventually find a special item which you take back to your room, add to your collection and painting, and then leave the room and start all over again. I gotta say, I love the atmosphere of the mansion. It is absolutely my favorite part about this game. Yes, it can be a jumbled mess of rooms that often loop or repeat with slight variations here and there, and the layout makes no sense architecturally, which is to be expected when rooms can shift around suddenly. It only cements the fact that what you're seeing is not really a mansion, but actually fragments, memories representing these rooms inside the painter's mind. While much of it is dark, spooky, and even hostile at times, there are some rooms that can feel downright cozy by comparison, even if the setting can seem a little repetitive. Despite being a 5-year-old game from a smaller developer, I think the graphics hold up pretty well today. Nothing mind-blowing, but everything works. The visual effects are also not bad, although there is not a lot of them. And for the most part, sound is good. I found the music too loud, but that's easily fixed in the settings. I also found the painter's footsteps a bit muffled, but I can live with that. The most severe auditory infraction involved the lighting. Certain lights, mostly lamps, buzz in a really high-pitched buzz that almost makes your ears want to bleed, and not in a good way. It's not constant, but I encountered it more times than I would have liked. But besides these minor complaints, everything else is fine. The outside storm is great, it really adds to the atmosphere, making scary moments even more unsettling, yet at the same time making the more cozy sections feel even more comfortable knowing that you're at least safe inside from the raging storm. And what little voice acting the game has was solid, so that's always a plus. Layers 1 is short and sweet. My playtime was a little over 3 hours to finish the game. There is a DLC titled Inheritance. It's basically more of the same gameplay. You take control of the daughter this time, exploring more deeply her relationship with her parents. This DLC only adds about an hour or so of gameplay, but there are multiple endings based on what choices you make, just like in the main game. However, I personally don't find the gameplay compelling enough to play through multiple times. The game is short, but just long enough that it doesn't overstay its welcome. Though the DLC is pushing it a bit, I would still recommend playing it if you like the story and want to dive a bit deeper. If you really want to get all the endings, I would recommend letting some time pass between playthroughs, weeks, months, or even years, such as once every Halloween season, or you might get burnt out. Layers of Fear 2 was released 3 years later. It brought with it a new story and several improved features. While the core gameplay is essentially the same, wander around unlocking bits of story, there are several new mechanics that make it a bit less walking simulatory than the previous game. We now have the ability to crouch and climb stairs. There's also a zoom mechanic, which isn't super useful most of the time, but it's nice that it's there. This time, we take the role of an actor, apparently a quite famous actor. There are frequent voiceovers, most notably the narration from two young children, a sister and her younger brother. Without spoiling anything, I'll just say that they are extremely relevant to the protagonist's story. The story itself, I feel, is a bit more abstract than Layers 1, at least at first. Though the game starts on a sinking ocean liner, each act will take you through various locations. The theme of ships and theater are omnipresent. Engine rooms, acting stages, dressing rooms, ship's quarters, and labyrinth gardens are just some of the areas you'll visit. This is a much welcome change from the limited mansion scenery of Layers 1, but the areas still shift around and change just as unpredictably and nonsensically as in the first game, perhaps even more so. There's a ton of disturbing scenes and creepy imagery, especially with mannequins. Lots of weird shit going on with mannequins here. You'll occasionally find puzzles you need to complete to progress. These are simple puzzles like finding the number to unlock a door or finding an item such as a crank to turn a lever or possibly a lever. Usually everything you need is all in the same room. But these puzzle elements are far and few between, and the focus of this game isn't so much puzzle solving as it is exploration. The environment interactions also feel more meaningful. In Layers 1, there was a lot of opening cabinets and cupboards with nothing in them. This time it feels like there are less things to open, but when you do, you're usually rewarded with a note or a letter, or at least something, almost never nothing. And there are also more variety of interactions, such as turning a valve directly next to a jet of steam to turn it off. These are nice and never feel like an annoyance and actually add to the gameplay and make it feel like you have more control and interaction with the world, immersing you even more. And speaking of interaction, one huge change is the consistency of opening doors. Almost every door you open is the same. You push. I find this natural and logical. You're progressing forward through the game, you press forward to open doors. In Layers 1, it felt like each door had a 50-50 chance of being one way or the other, and it was a minor annoyance. In fact, opening doors and interacting in general feels overall much smoother here. Another new gameplay feature is the addition of monsters that you can kill. They are mostly just used for chase scenes, and they're not exactly my favorite part of the game. Sometimes the trial and error of not knowing how to escape, then getting sent back to the last checkpoint can be frustrating, especially because the dying and loading sound transition is quite jarring. Thankfully, I didn't encounter too many of these moments, and also you can turn off the monster's ability to kill you in the settings if you really want to. There are also quite a bit of jump scares. I thought they were maybe laid on a little thick near the beginning, but it kind of mellowed out as time went on, so I would say it's acceptable. One of the most obvious changes from Layers 1 is the graphics. Of course, everything has a higher poly count and resolution, and it's actually quite significant given that there's only a 3-year difference in these games' releases. Everything is also much brighter. Granted, there are still plenty of dark sections, but it's also easier to see during these parts. I think not only does better lighting technology help, but so does a good sense of lighting direction. There are also a lot of shifting color palettes and screen effects such as sepia tones and film grainy saturation. This is also done really well, except the fact that almost the entirety of Act 2 is in black and white, and I'm not really a fan of that. There's a lot more voice acting in this game, and it's pretty much spot on. Kudos to Bloober Team for actually finding child voice actors that weren't complete garbage. In fact, they were quite good. There are more and better sound effects and music as well. And it's all good for the most part, though there's this one musical theme that gets a little old. At least it's not way too loud by default this time. The lights still buzz, but this time more in a way that you'd expect them to. Like 1, Layers 2 is short. This one took me a little bit longer at about 5 hours or so. Again, it has multiple endings, which I'll probably explore next holiday season, and also features a New Game Plus mode. Layers 2 has more gameplay mechanics, better graphics, more variety in just about every category, and an overall better presentation. Now, does all this modernization make it a better game? Well, that's a highly subjective decision to make. I had more fun with Layers 2, but Layers 1, while simpler, has its own charm. Bloober really nailed the psychological horror atmosphere in 1, in my opinion, which 2 is a bit more lacking in, instead going for more surrealism similar to other modern horror games. Personally, I liked both games, and I would suggest you try them out for yourself and draw your own conclusions. That's it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Boss Raid.